Welcome to E Squared Emporium for all things AP Psychology. Today we are continuing with cognitive development and we're going to move on past Piaget. Remember, cognition is the mental activities that are thinking, remembering, and knowing. Just a side note, we don't have to write any of this in our notes, but we've done studies now with TV and we could say media, computer media, and the impact on babies' brains. They found that babies would have cognitive and language delays, especially if they were watching adult programming or programming not specifically designed for children. So 60 minutes, 1 hour a day of TV or media had developmental scores that were one-third lower at 14 months. So this means that while the child is placed in front of the TV, the family isn't talking, they're not reading, and they're not playing with the child, which is how cognitive development would be enhanced. They found that watching non-educational media such as SpongeBob actually was worse than, say, something like Sesame Street. And that also means, again, the family is spending less time reading. That's 1 hour a day not reading to the child or playing and interacting with the child, expecting the TV to raise them. Just a little FYI. So now we're going to move into Lev Vygotsky's social cultural theory, sometimes also called social development theory. So who was Lev Vygotsky? He was a Russian psychologist, and he contributed a great deal to this field of cognitive development, particularly to children. Now, he died very young at 37, but within that time, he wrote 6 books on social development theory, language development, and theories for education. So his social development theory, also sometimes called his social cultural theory, basically says that children are social beings, and it's the social interaction that plays a fundamental role in how we develop our cognition, our thinking, and how we develop our neural connections. He says that children's early learning and development is mostly social, and he says every function that happens in the child's development, it happens twice. It happens once on the social level between the people that are there, mom, dad, guardians, preschool teachers, friends, and it happens again on an individual level inside the child. And that's how the child internalizes all of the learning that just took place. He created the zone of proximal development, which I shorten as ZBD. This is the level of development that is attained when we're engaged in social behavior. But notice that there is a comfort zone. We call it the Goldilocks zone, right? There is a place within this chart here. What can I do all by myself? For a child, it might be I can tie my shoe. It might be I can microwave mac and cheese. It might be I can make a piece of toast, right? And then what's the next level? What do I need help with? And that's where we have our training wheels. That's the zone that we're talking about. That zone where maybe I could make cookies, but I would need grandma's help to do the entire recipe. And then outside of that is what I can't do. And that's what we say when we like throw you into the deep end, right? We don't want to put a child there. We want to put the child in that purple area, that zone where with enough support, they can learn to improve and get better. So it's a range of skills that can be developed with adult guidance or peer collaboration, right? In school, we can put you with a student who happens to know the subject a little bit better than you, and you can stretch out of that zone with their help. So it exceeds what the child can do all on their own. And how do we help in that zone? In the zone, we do what's called scaffolding, and this is still used in education and sports and the job market all over the place today. Scaffolding is providing temporary support to children as they go up the steps. You're gradually decreasing how much you're assisting, and the child is increasing how much they can do it on their own with the proficiency in a new skill or concept. So you provide that temporary framework, much like we put training wheels on a bicycle, and then you gradually can remove some of that extra support. So maybe you break the subject down into tiny steps. Maybe you provide color coding or visual aids, or Maybe you practice together the first time and then you let the student try it on their own with you watching, and then the student can do it on their own as homework. So these training wheels get removed as the student gets more competent and more capable. So Vygotsky and Piaget have some differences in their theories. Let's look at some of the differences. So Piaget felt that curiosity and play helped in our learning. And Vygotsky agrees, but he says, yeah, there's so much more emphasis on society and culture and on being with other people when you do this play. And Piaget felt that our development was fueled from within us, that children go through very specific stages and that it is fueled within. If you just left a child alone on the floor, they would eventually go to the next level, and they would eventually go to the next level, and they would eventually go to the next level. Vygotsky doesn't see them as stages. Remember, we talked about stages versus not stages. Vygotsky thinks that all the environment, the external factors, the culture, the people, the caregivers, the friends, that they play a significant role. And Vygotsky, of course, has that zone of proximal development and scaffolding. Right, so those are sort of the major differences between them. So let's go on. We're going to jump. We talked about the teenage brain a little bit. We're going to jump to the aging brain. Let's jump to what happens at the other end of the spectrum. We already talked about crystallized versus fluid intelligence, but this unit is where it really comes into play. So crystallized intelligence involves recalling facts and information from a stored base of knowledge, and that data can be applied to new situations. An example of crystallized intelligence: Jasmine has been cooking for decades. Jasmine no longer needs any of her cookbooks. She has memorized the recipes. She can make cookies and lasagna and meatballs just from scratch. She doesn't need to go back and look at the cookbook. That's crystallized intelligence. That intelligence remains stable or stronger as we age and get older. But we tend to lose our fluid intelligence. Fluid intelligence is the ability to solve new encountered problems based on logic and reason. So Susan and her friends love to go to murder mystery dinners, and they love to try to solve crimes before anyone else. That is what we have when we are younger, in our 20s and 30s and 40s. Another way of looking at this: fluid intelligence is from nature. It's inherited. It may not be learned in school. It is our inherited ability to reason and think and problem solve. Crystallized intelligence is our accumulated knowledge, so it's more nurture. It's what we learned in education. It's what we learned in internships. It's learning based. And it's how we apply our skills and our knowledge to the problems that we encounter. So older adults, the number of words that they recognize remains stable through age. Now, of course, Alzheimer's is going to change this, but the number of words that they recall declines with age. So they'll recognize it if they see it, but may not be able to recall it without a prompt. Verbal scores tend to stay stable with age, but nonverbal scores tend to decline with age. So older adults may not remember what they ate for breakfast this morning or what they just had for lunch, but they may still remember Christmas Day 1934. It just depends on recognition versus recall and verbal versus nonverbal. So as we age, we have slower processing speed, slower perceptual speed, slower reaction time, and again, we may have memory issues. So dementia is just a general term for any loss of memory, language, problem solving, and other thinking abilities. Alzheimer's is one form of dementia. Typically, we don't use the term dementia until it is severe enough to interfere with your daily life and you start forgetting who people are, you start forgetting where you are and how you got there. Alzheimer's is the most common cause of dementia and the one that we tend to focus on the most. So Alzheimer's disease, remember we focused on this a lot when we were in the biology unit. It is a progressive and irreversible brain disorder. You have gradual deterioration of the memory and language function and physical function. It tends to run its course between 5 to 20 years. It can come on quickly and it can really disable a person very quickly. We know that it's caused by the deterioration of neurons that produce the neurotransmitter acetylcholine or ACH. A couple aging theories that are not in your handout, but they're interesting. The cellular clock theory says that our cells have a maximum number of divisions before they can't divide any longer. And adding on to that, we've now studied telomeres. Telomeres are the DNA sequences, it's the ends of the chromosomes, and they shorten with each cell division. So every time our cells divide, we lose a little bit of our telomeres. And this shortening of telomeres is a key factor in aging and in the development of age-related diseases. So we discovered this first when we cloned the sheep Dolly in the 1990s and noticed that her lifespan was drastically shortened. And that led to the study of telomeres and aging theories. What if we could reverse this? Wouldn't that be cool? And the last theory that we're going to talk about that's not in your handout is jellyfish is one way that we might be able to actually do something to stop aging. We could possibly reverse the aging process. There is a jellyfish called the immortal jellyfish that potentially could live forever. He's being investigated right now. When the jellyfish is stressed or damaged or sick, it can revert back to the polyp stage through a process called transdifferentiation. So the polyp then grows back into a full adult medusa and then back to the polyp stage and then back to the medusa stage. And so, as far as scientists have been able to study so far, this creature looks biologically immortal. So that's definitely something to look into. They're also looking into shark cartilage. Sharks don't seem to suffer dementia and Alzheimer's. And so they're looking at what is in shark cartilage or within the shark's brain that could someday help humans. And now you're ready for language 3.5.